So, I want to talk about Limited because Mistveil is shaping up to be pretty one of a kind. And that's because when you go to play Sealed, when you go to play Draft or Blitz or Class Constructed, they're all going to have their own sort of unique feel thanks to the ratio of Transcend cards, right? It's really going to make or break the deck, given the fact that that is what your heroes are building around, right? That's your big, strong payoff. So being able to run 9 in Blitz, a 40-card deck, 9 in 60, a Classic Construct deck, however many you can pull in Sealed or Draft, is going to make each format feel very unique and very diverse. And when it comes to Sealed, I think they've done a wonderful job of making this the big showcase format of the power of the set. And not only that, I want to give props to LSS in the fact that these modern sets are fun in a box, right? Each set has their own flavor. Each set is worth going back to, grabbing a group of friends and playing either Draft or Sealed, because the limited formats are full of love, right? Full of fun design to actually make them stand out and make them worthwhile outside of, again, just opening a box, finding the game pieces you want for your deck, for whatever you're playing, Blitz or Class Constructed. Now, when it comes to Sealed, there are a few big changes that really emphasize this for Mistveil. So each player opens 6 boosters, young heroes, so Blitz, 30 cards minimum, but you can have the usual maximum. I think, can you actually go above 40? I haven't read too much, but I always lean towards 30 because, again, I like combo, and 30 seems a bit funner when it comes to Transcend. Any amount of each unique card, so regardless of what you open, with the exception of old legendaries, right? Old legendaries, and then the rounds we don't really worry about. That actual out might come into a big contention because these might end up being slower decks. It all depends on how impactful the actual payoff for Chi ends up being. For new, I can see that being slower. For Crouching Tiger, Zen, or just spammy Spectral Shield, Enigma, I could see them being, fairly quick games where you just run away. But yeah, so 6 boosters. That's the first big change. 6 becomes 8 in Mistveil, and this is really important because when we look at the Transcend cards, what we have so far is a bunch of common rarity marbles, right? Now, obviously the marbles are still hard to pull, but the fact that their counterparts are common is really impactful. Now, Preserved Condition, we know for complete certainty that is a common, and therefore the following ones are common given the normal scheming of sets, but I would highly assume that Homage to the Ancestors is common as well. A gain 1 life does not seem like a rare effect, but also, again, in terms of making Sealed so impactful, I would assume that every single Transcend card we're getting, so we're still missing 1, is going to be common. Any other support for the mechanic is going to be in that lower rarity to, again, truly show off the mechanic. So where this comes into just having a great impact is, again, that rarity. So we know, again, 8. So we have 3, I'm going to say Majestic, but I can see them putting it at common just for the fun of it as well, right? So we'll just use 8. So we know there's 8. Again, 17 minus 3 minus 6 leaves 8 common cards. There's 11 common slots in a pack, meaning that your chances of finding at least 1 Transcend card per booster is about 70% chance, right? Again, rarity doesn't work as exact odds. You could get a ton of them, you could get less, but on average, you should end up with about 5 to 6 Transcend cards for your deck. Now, 5 to 6 in a 40-card deck is obviously below Blitz usual ratio, right? Again, 9 having all 8 and then the 1 Sacred Art in a 40-card deck or a 60-card deck, Class Constructed. So if you're running a bigger deck in Sealed, yes, they're going to be less impactful. But if you stick to that small scale, that 30-card deck, having 5 to 6 of these or even more is going to be fantastic because, again, they're going to be pretty easy to play, pretty easy to trigger, right? Even if it's, as simple as something a little bit weaker. That's your blue, that's your pop. We're looking to have tons of blues as well. Then you Transcend, you get your Chi, and then your hero ability. That still seems like an okay turn. Plus, then you get whatever payoff you normally have. I mean, you could, for instance, take the shuffle mechanic. If you get a bunch of it, put target action card, right? That's resourceful, especially if you're, again, running a smaller deck, 30-card deck. We have banish from your opponents. That is beautiful for new. You probably want a lot of them, right? These are still impactful effects despite them being common. So overall, they're going to make Sealed super exciting, super interesting. Because again, if we look at the rates, right? For Blitz, you have roughly a 1 in 4 chance to have 1 in any given hand, right? As the game goes on, obviously that increases as you go through deck. For Class Constructed, it's a bit less. It's about 1 in 6. But then for Sealed, if you take that lower end, if you run a 30 card deck, if you run, slightly better odds so that you can get your Transcend off, you can get your Chi, and you can start really banking on your hero ability. I think it's going to be a really fun, impactful time. And most of all, it's, again, going to be diverse compared to Blitz, Class Constructor, or even Drafting. Drafting is still 3 packs, so your chances of finding a bunch of Transcend cards is a lot less. But again, that just means it's flavorful. You're going to have Draft, where you're not really going to bank on your hero ability as much. You're going to get to show off some of the other Mystic interactions, some of the other cards in the sets. Then you're going to have Sealed, where you can try and go full on into Transcend. If you pull a ton of them, right, you really have to think about, you really have to ratio your deck in terms of being able to then bank on either going into your hero ability, depending on who you're playing. But then it also opens up the idea of a lot of these cards aren't singular by nature, right? They work in any of the 3. In fact, I'd say the more Transcend you get, the more likely you are to play, say, Nu, and then just bank on using your opponent's deck. Nigma and Zen are both mid in terms of, again, that ratio, where you can get super impactful results for running a bunch of them. But I think, again, there will be great merit to A, the number of cards you choose to include, the amount of Transcend and Chi you choose to include, but overall it should be boosted and ramped compared to, again, Blitz and Class Constructed. And overall, the fact that there are these multitude of options for what you're going to run and how much thought you have to actually put into this limited format, they've knocked it out of the park, right? Mistveil is going to be the funnest, to me, limited experience out of every set they've made so far because of its uniqueness, because of the card interactions, and because of the amount of thought you have to put into the deck you're crafting. Again, 30 cards is usually a disadvantage because you're getting less card economics than your opponent. But with Nu, you can take that backwards. If you just have a stockpile of Chi, you start milling your opponent's deck, you start playing their cards for free, right? I mean, it does depend on how many blue cards, for instance, are in the set overall, right? Whether or not it's ratioed like a normal one, or if it does lean heavily into the blue, and you sort of know that your opponent is going to run a great deal of blues, then Nu is definitely impactful. But I can also see Zen, right? Just depending on the Crouching Tiger spot. I know we're going off of how many cards so far? 6, 12, 18, hardly any. We're going off of hardly any cards in the set, but it's already shaping up to be super exciting and interesting. We haven't even seen, the other big mechanics. We know there's some Transcend mechanics, there's some blue mechanics, but, it's still pretty much an empty slate. But again, that makes it super exciting because we already have this huge Transcend mechanic that underpins the different formats and the ratio of amount of Chi, the amount of Transcend, the amount of payoff for your hero ability versus, what else you're trying to do. But yeah, so Zen, if there are a ton of Crouching Tiger payoffs, right, then I can see, again, running a ton of Chi just so that you can bank on either, finding your combo or just 2 Crouching Tigers, one on your opponent's turn, one on your turn, right? If you have Chi in your hand and you're stuck with it for blocking, well, you could end up with maybe 3 Crouching Tigers to start your turn, and that could be a good enough turn. It means you probably only have to keep 1 card if there is a overarching, buff for Crouching Tiger. And then Enigma as well. You turn a Chi into a ward, it's okay. But again, depending on the weapon, depending on how much she's spamming, attacking with Spectral Shields, again, I could see you end your turn, you have 1 Chi left over, you create your first Spectral Shield, you go into your opponent's turn, you draw another Chi, you create another one, and then you also have another Chi, so your following turn, it's a 3rd Spectral Shield, or something like that. Again, that mechanic could work, and it could be super interesting. It's all thanks to the ratio. So I was a bit off-put by the fact that these are all common, but the more I think about it, the more it just makes so much sense when it comes to, again, showcasing their feel for sealed, for limited, for drafting, to create these multitude of play experiences depending on what exactly you're participating in for Mistveil. And it's just insane to think about how well this set might end up being crafted. It's definitely going to be standout to me in terms of the play experience, more so than even Crack Shuffle Play, just from the diversity aspect. So I can't wait to see what else there is. And yeah, limited is just going to be just such an interesting ballpark to me. Again, it all comes down to that ratio of cards. Sealed, right? You're going to get possibly a ton of Transcends, 5+ on average. Then you have Blitz, Class Constructed, right? We know there's a cap of 9 unless we get a bunch of other Transcend cards. So 9 in Blitz, 9 in Class Constructed is still going to feel different. And then drafting as well, right? If you draft a bunch, sure, then you can go into Transcend. If you don't, then you have to work around with the other cards in the set. And overall, each format is going to have its own play experience, and that is just super exciting to see. So kudos to LSS. It's shaping up to be their best play experience in my honest opinion.